Hello, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Box to Box podcast, joined by three fantastic guests: Charlie, Theo, and Dom. I'm David. It might be help if I tell people my own name when I do the introduction. We've got a jam-packed show as ever tonight. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with any of the scores that are happening in the EFL Cup at the moment. Certainly, Dom will with Aston Villa. We're already winning 1-0. So we'll keep you up to date with all of that. We're also going to have a big chat about the whole Dementia in football situation. We've had heading limits imposed this week to sort of prevent it going forward. We've had more players, former players, diagnosed with dementia in the past month or so, including Terry McDermott, former Liverpool player, and Dennis Law, of course, Manchester United and Manchester City. Otherwise, we'll catch up on some transfers, and we'll talk about the Premier League clubs not allowing their players to travel abroad to red list countries at the upcoming international break. We'll have a chat about the safety net plan for the Champions League, which is looking like it's going to be scrapped, and plenty of other stuff. So first of all, let's begin with the dementia in football stuff. It's obviously a very sad topic, and it's something that's been going on since sort of Jeff Astle in at West Brom a couple of years ago, and it was found that football and heading the football particularly had a big impact on his death. Charlie, what do you make of all this, particularly the news of more and more players, former players, are coming out with dementia? What do you make of the news and obviously the heading limits as well?
Well, I think it's something that needs to be dealt with. Really, I think it's now getting to the stage where you're seeing more and more cases of it coming out in footballers. So, look, heading is a part and parcel of football. It happens throughout the game, but I think if you can try and limit it as much as you can in the weeks building up to games, then I think it'll only have a positive result. And you've just got to think that the families of the individuals that are suffering with dementia now and more are probably a little bit more worried about it. I think if this is found out and more happen, something needs to change as it has now, and I think it will stay in the game for years to come.
Yeah, Dom, do you think that the heading limits that have been
I think with the whole sort of dementia and football and heading limits and rules, I think it's very difficult because football is a game where naturally when you play it, there's going to be instances where you're put into a heading situation, whether it's through a cross, a clearance, a goal kick, something like that. People are going to go for aerial duels, and you can't really stop that happening in games. What you can do, and what Charlie mentions about limiting it in training, and especially limiting it for people of a younger age. And I think as football sort of evolved over time, as we see like the quality of football changing in England, especially when managers like Wenger have sort of evolved it, I think we're seeing more teams trying to play on the ground, and I think that's trying to sort of go down the pyramid a little bit, as it probably should. And hopefully as teams, as heading becomes less sort of, I'm not saying the heading isn't done now, it's done a lot, it's an integral part of the game, but seeing it happen less and seeing wiser limits in training and how we sort of conduct the research around the actual physical dementia effects of it, I think these are all really important steps that football has to take, because it's a really dangerous and important matter that we're dealing with.
I mean, about the game changing a little bit, because a lot of has been made about the ball. But Theo, what do you make of it? Because the research that was done in Glasgow says that defenders are 3 times more likely to develop neurological diseases from after playing football. What can we do to sort of, I'd say, balance that out, but that's probably not the right word, to eradicate it? I know, as Dom says, it's very difficult because it's part of the game. So how do we do it without really changing the game too much? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Charlie and Dom and what they've said. I think that research, when it did come out earlier this year from Glasgow, is really interesting because, as you say, it is part of the game, but how do you actually mitigate that from happening? And just like the others have said, it's to do, in training, well, not necessarily in games, but if you limit it in training, it can have an impact in terms of you're not heading in the game, but in training as well, and it just maximizes the potential of this situation. Maybe, I don't know, the other ways, perhaps it's difficult because if the ball's in the air, you're going to have to head it. But I know in the years gone by, like slide tackling, really hard tackles, referees just give a yellow card. So just stop others getting encouraged to do the similar thing. Whether they can implement that with heading as well, that would probably help. So, footballers don't get into these situations later on in their lives. But I don't know, interestingly, if you guys followed what happened in the NFL, even years ago, Will Smith did a film on this where it was the advertising companies or companies working with the NFL clubs. They didn't want to hear it because obviously the NFL was massive and heading, using your head is part of the game. But if the Premier League and the authorities can do something with it, make the rules a bit more stringent, then the better. But of course, it's part of the game. And if you take that out, we're all just going to be using our football, our foot, seeing people's feet high up in the air and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's difficult. How do you stop it? I don't know. It's very difficult.
It's a very difficult question, and I apologise for throwing it at you that way because it's a tough one to answer. But the three you done really well to answer it. It's interesting what you say about the NFL. I feel like something that's probably going to come the Premier League's way and English football's way is brewing, similarly to how it did in the NFL and how it works now. Obviously, the whole concussion substitutions is a positive move forward. It's very difficult, isn't it? It's like if you were ever, when you were kids and you played football and you played the game of five-a-side and the coach was like, right, the ball goes in the air, just bring it down. It's got to stay on the floor, like these silly rules. Is that what we do going forward? I don't know. Does the referee start giving cards out for people who win headers? Virgil van Dijk will get sent off every week. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Just some of the research that I've seen on it was, the footballers were 3.5 times more likely to die of these diseases from basically heading the football, including dementia, and they had a 5 times or 5-fold risk of developing Alzheimer's. Charlie, those numbers are staggering, aren't they? As the lads are saying there, if the ball's in the air, you're going to win the header. You can't stop that. So how do we stop them from themselves? Because it's their livelihood, it's the players' livelihoods after they finish playing, isn't it? So what can we do?
Yeah, well, it's a tough one. I mean, I listened to, I think it was 606, sort of towards the back end of last season, and I think it was Robbie Savage was on, and his mum was on, and there was another family member who was on from some other family, and they'd mentioned about their husband who'd obviously suffered from dementia, and just hearing exactly how they have been, it's a real issue, and it's something that has been sort of growing the last couple of years. But I think you've just got to limit it in training. You've got to try and take it out as much as you can in training. In a game situation, you have to accept that that's going to happen. You can't not allow people to head the ball. But I think in training, there have to be rules made where you just say, you know what, we keep the ball on the floor and we just make it as safe as possible for the players in the long term.
Yeah, so the rule is apparently that they can have, I think it's 10 high impact headers per week in training. The rule's very vague because, Dom, what is it? What is a high impact header? How do you justify that? And also, who's counting it? Is Dean Smith standing at the side of the pitch going, Tyrone, you've had 9, mate. That's it for now. What do you reckon?
I mean, it's crazy because I don't think there's a metric to measure what a high impact header is, even if you can define it, and I don't think you can do either. Like, is that just any header where the ball is coming at you as opposed to from a static sort of starting position? But then, what about a flick-on's different to heading the ball forward or heading it to the side? Do we start adding in factors like that? I think the more that you sort of try and dig deeper into what heading is, you sort of are overcomplicating is what a very simple motion of just using your head to direct the football is. Using different areas, the head might have different areas, might have different levels of impact perhaps on sort of the damage aspect of it. So that might be some interesting research that might have to happen. But 10 high impact headers a week in training, I don't see how a measure like that can sort of be measured, and I don't see how it can be enforced, and I don't really see what purpose it holds rather than just to be a bit of a symbol. But I just wanted to quickly say, you mentioned the football scores. I've just watched Almar El Ghazi score a Panenka penalty, so I've had a great few minutes while thinking about all this heading stuff.
I'm glad you have, mate. I'm glad you have, because do you know what? In a few years, you might not remember it after all the football and the balls you've headed. Lovely way to segue that back into the segment there. Yeah, Theo, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because I was quite interested by the whole high impact. The language is very, as you say, you mentioned the NFL and what they've sort of changed. This language feels very vague purposely for me, so that down the line they can't sort of say, well, they can get around it, because I wouldn't like to be in the FIFA's, UEFA's, the FA, the PFA in their position trying to change something, because we don't like change. People don't like change. If you start eradicating headers, it's going to be tough, isn't it?
I think we're going to need to have VAR for headers at this point, lad.
But not more VAR, surely.
Another one. Interestingly, Dom was talking about the different circumstances someone finds themselves headering the ball. Sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's you're in the penalty box and someone takes a shot. Let's say like Oxlade-Chamberlain, who has a ridiculously very fast shot, and you're standing there as a defender and the ball just hits you in the head. We've seen those in the past. And then the football is on the ground, just, lying down, and they get the magic spray and everything sorted out. But it's those circumstances you don't prepare for. Maybe you would have to go down the route of wearing protection on your head as a footballer. We've got people wearing shin pads. Some goalkeepers wear protection on their head, and perhaps it becomes normalized that way. Maybe that's one way to tackle it. But if you're talking about high impact, what does that even mean? I mean, it's one of those things where people, who are in management, who are in the office, they come up with these terminologies, and, how do we then apply that practically? So I don't know, maybe if we do get into that stage of head protection or headgear, it might look a bit odd to start with, but in the long term, it's actually helping people. And maybe that's one thing they have to consider.
Yeah, potentially. And again, even that is going to cause a little bit of disruption. But at the same time, if we can stop, I think for the older generation now, how do they feel that some of their heroes growing up are now coming down with dementia? And, it's sad. And I wonder if when we get to our old age, if we're lucky enough to make it that far, will we feel the same way? I hope there's not an influx of players, because the big sort of, when this started becoming mainstream, particularly when Nobby Stiles was diagnosed with dementia, people were like, oh, the ball is a lot lighter now and it's fine. But they've actually found that the ball is still the same. It has the same impact on your head and it can still do the same damage. So I just hope we don't get to that time and, all of our heroes are getting dementia and stuff like that. It's a scary, scary thought. But hopefully, there's more research coming out, and hopefully these changes can certainly help this generation of footballers, and hopefully those who are going forward as well. Right, let's move on to something a little bit more maybe controversial. Who knows? The international break is, of course, around the corner. We were bemoaning this before we came on air. I particularly can't stand the way you're just getting into the season. It just gets into flow, and it's like, see ya, we're having a week off. But it is around the corner. Some clubs are stopping their players from travelling on international duty due to certain fixtures being in red list countries. They've all put a statement out today, Charlie, to say they're all together, the Premier League clubs, and they won't let it happen. Do you think it's the right move, or should players be allowed to travel for their international fixtures?
Look, I think the point I want to make is the fact that if all clubs are united together, then I don't see an issue in that happening. If you have 45% of the Premier League saying yes and of the clubs saying yes and some saying no, then I think there's going to be a conflict there. But with the whole of the Premier League saying we're not going to do that, that's the point I make and say, do you know what? I think that's fine, because they still spread. They can still spread the virus, and going to red listed countries isn't allowed for other people. So I believe that if they put a stop to it all together and they're united as one, then I'm all for them stopping players going out on international duty.
Okay, Dom, do you see this as an avenue for teams to, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of stop the players going away more often, because we all know, particularly Premier League managers, hate their players going on international duty for fear of injury and fatigue and stuff like that. Do you think this opens up more opportunities for them to sort of take back control of where the player goes?
I think it's really difficult because one of the most important things about the statement that's come out today is that it's a joint thing between clubs, and those clubs won't have made those decisions without consulting their players. And it's players like, for Villa, Emi Martinez and Emi Buendia, who now can't go and join up with the Argentina squad, who will be annoyed at missing out because everyone wants to play for their country. But I think COVID not as much provides like an avenue or an opportunity, but I think it's more a necessity because, especially considering how disrupted pre-season has been. I mean, taking Villa, for example, with the Euros and the Coaches League, I know that's subjective, but take that as an example. We've had a really disrupted pre-season. For us to then, a few weeks into the season, be having another international break where a bunch of players would leave, some of them wouldn't come back because they have to then spend 10 days in isolation. They might even catch the virus. They might spread the virus. It's a massive, massive risk to potentially take, and I could understand why clubs are really reluctant to do that, and ultimately I think we have to respect the right of clubs. It's difficult because you also have competitions like AFCON, which occur in the middle of the season, and those present other problems, and I wonder whether because of COVID, especially this season, and maybe with Qatar World Cup next season, we might see further changes in how clubs and players handle going out on international duty.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the African Cup of Nations, and obviously that happens in January and February in the winter when we've seen COVID tends to rise and have a little bit of a spike. Certainly last year, that could be one to keep an eye on. Theo, do you think exemptions should be made for? I'm thinking Premier League players here purely because that's what we're talking about, and the UK government has got the power to do that. But do you think they should make exemptions for those players?
I totally agree. As the others have said, we've got to a point where it's a general consensus. People are in agreement with this. As I said, I could be biased as well. Arsenal have struggled in the first two games of the season. In the first game, we lost to Aubameyang and Lacazette, and in the game against just over the weekend, we lost Ben White. Although Chelsea were a brilliant team, we still lost Ben White, and we've lost Willian and so many other players who are just going in and out, and they are still in this country. Just imagine if they go to red list countries, mingling in with lots of other people, it could be a disaster. So I do think it's just better in the context of things. I think this is all about context. I don't think they'll be saying if there was no COVID, obviously. But I think in context, it's very helpful because then managers aren't having to think about, this player could potentially come back, and then the entire camp. I remember Arsenal weren't meant to go to the States for pre-season, and that didn't happen purely because of an outbreak of COVID. So if we're then sending, our players to other countries, red list countries, so on and so forth, it could just be a disaster. And we all know this is a results business, and if you're missing key players and results don't go your way, managers could be, in big trouble, and the club as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult because, as you say there, you've lost Ben White. There's still going to be plenty of disruptions from coronavirus, but at the same time, you've got to weigh it up with the fact that players are going to want to go and represent their country. I know from a Liverpool point of view, Liverpool have told Mohamed Salah he can play in Egypt's fixture I think it's in Gabon, whatever it's called, but he can't travel with them anywhere else to a red list country. That's the only place he can go with them, and it's like, well, I know its salary is that good, but is there any point in going? I was going to talk about this a little bit later on, but we might as well bring it in now. Coming back to you, Charlie, about coronavirus and stuff like that. Obviously, we've seen games get postponed last year and things like that. I think, Dom, am I right in saying Aston Villa wasn't long after an international break?
I don't think it was after an international break.
Right.
It was just at the start of the year, though, when you talked about how start of the year there's like a bigger sort of outbreak.
Right. Okay. I thought it was after an international break. I don't know why. I remember Thiago got COVID.
Oh, no, it was, you're right.
Was it?
Yeah, you're right. It was right after an international break. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that was what caused it, but, there's potential for it. So, Charlie, in terms of looking ahead to the season, and particularly after this international break, should it go ahead? Should exemptions be made for these players? Let's be hypothetical. How much of an impact is coronavirus going to have on the season as a whole? Not just this international break, but also the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. I mean, if I come from a non-league point of view, my local side, Scarborough, the integrity of the league was brought. The reason why the league was brought to a halt last year, and obviously, folks, the integrity was gone because so many teams were pulling out because of COVID, and there was outbreaks. And I know that at a non-league level, the majority of players have full-time jobs alongside football, so they're going to be susceptible to getting it. But I think for a professional football level, and obviously at Middlesbrough, if we had to have a COVID outbreak, if one of our players went and caught that, the squad isn't big enough to facilitate an outbreak of COVID because we would literally not be able to train, or we wouldn't be able to put a side out. So I think in that one, if the disruption that it's going to cause, it's naturally going to put a lot of strain on a lot of sides, and the health and safety of players is paramount at the moment. But you've just got to hope that another spike doesn't come along, and we start to see cases rising in sort of the general testing in the Football League and in the Premier League.
Yeah, 16 positive tests in the Premier League last week. Obviously, Ben White was one of those. So was Christian Pulisic. Dom, as a supporter of a team that experienced a delay in their fixtures last season, how keen are you to avoid a similar repeat this year?
Well, the thing is, Villa's COVID outbreak last season didn't just sort of pause. Our form before our COVID outbreak, we were pretty much 4th or 5th in the league. And then after the COVID outbreak, we started playing way, way worse. Players like Ross Barkley never came back the same. And the entire team's performance dipped. So while performance is one thing, we have to think about what Charlie was just saying about player health, player safety. I think spectator safety, match day staff safety, just general club staff safety. I think we have to take into account the amount of people and the amount of effort and the amount of energy and money that goes on in football behind the scenes at both a non-league level and an elite level. And it's a lot easier, I think, for Premier League clubs to use money to get away with that, and it's not for non-league clubs. So I think it's unavoidable that because we're still seeing COVID infection, we're still seeing COVID cases, we're seeing players get COVID, we're seeing players like Carl Darlow suffering and Alan St Maximin with long COVID. Jamal Lascelles had it as well, I think.
Yeah,
they struggled with COVID particularly. We don't know fully the impact of COVID on elite sport athletes, and we've seen how much it's derailed football, and we've seen how it's still around in terms of infections, even though the vaccine's going around. So I think it's unavoidable that, especially on an international stage, I think COVID is going to have a massive impact on football in the upcoming season, to be honest.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. Obviously, the vaccine has slowed down death rates quite considerably. But I mean, I think it's just going to keep mutating, isn't it? I think it's going to keep mutating, and I think it's just going to be here forever, potentially. Theo, you're an Arsenal fan. I know you went to the Emirates in pre-season. Based on all of this and all this COVID thing that we're talking about, how long do you think you're going to have the option to go to the stadium? How long are we away from it being behind closed doors again?
Oh, do you know, that's a good question. I'd say if cases start going up again, because restrictions are gone now pretty much, I'd say give it maybe a month or two. If we do start seeing numbers going up again, then they'll have to start asking questions. Is this the right thing to do? Interestingly, just off Arsenal, but I remember hearing, someone in management at Stevenage Football Club, and they were saying, we probably have to consider we don't have the financial capabilities as Premier League clubs, so we have to keep things small scale and protect our staff, protect players, and so on and so forth, because they don't have the financial power. But for people, in the Premier League, let's say top 6 teams or top 10 teams who are on Sky every week or on TV, they've got big TV deals, whereas some of these other clubs don't. So we really have to think about, how is this going to go forward? And I think the teams at the very, very top are going to be okay. They may struggle because they may have bigger, wage bills, but it's the teams at the top which I'm concerned about, lower down the leagues, who are probably thinking this needs to go away very soon, because fans play a huge part in their match days. So who knows? I'd say give it a few months if things do improve. But as you were saying, vaccinations are slowing death rates down. Long may that continue.
Yeah, definitely. And we've spoke about vaccine passports and proof of negative tests and things like that. There's plenty more on the website if you want to read up about that, and obviously you can watch old clips of the podcast. Of course, the Premier League are saying that it's random checks for people who go to the ground. Charlie, there was talk about it being completely mandated across the league that you had to be double jabbed to go to a match. Where do you stand on that? We might as well get some more thoughts on it. Should everyone be double jabbed? Should it be a case of you have to show a negative test, or is random checks the right way to go about it?
I think the negative test one would, for me, I don't think you should force people to have to be double jabbed. But I think, it's going to have to be a random checks with them showing it still. But just on what Theo was saying there, I mean, when it first sort of the season was brought to a hold in non-league, you look at when there was sort of the fans came back, but there was the cap on what capacity you could have. At Scarborough, we have a stadium of about 3,000. So we need about, I'd say probably 1,000 plus is what we get every week. So capping us at about 400, 300 is just completely not financially viable. So you bring that in, say Christmas time, the club won't survive. Neither will other big clubs in the league. So, on that one, I agree with what Theo was saying then, and just to give a non-league perspective really on it. But I do think that they're going to have to keep asking people to show negative tests, random tests, just to be careful, because you'd rather be safe than sorry, wouldn't you, really?
Yeah, I suppose you would. Dom, where do you stand on this, mate?
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder to sort of ask people to be double jabbed. As much as I fully support everyone getting both of their jabs, it's a lot more difficult to sort of mandate that than it is to mandate having a negative test, and to continue doing the random checks, which I think are nice ideas as well. I think when you go to a football game, people talk about football as a sport where it's about your community, your family. You go there to see people, and I think unless we make that place of community, that place of socialising, that place of family, a safe place to do that, and the way to do that is by making sure people there aren't spreading, this disease, then I think that's something that football has to be a priority in football, especially for the safety of, non-league clubs who, as Charlie referred to, are completely reliant on filling their stadiums every week to run and operate. The pandemic completely destroyed their finances, and it's important that we make sure fans are in stadiums to keep the football economy at the bottom of the pyramid ticking.
Yeah, I think you've both sort of touched on, people should be either double jabbed or negative tests. But Theo, I just want to ask you, they've both also mentioned finance. How do you go about policing this? Because that's it's going to cause disruption getting into the ground, first and foremost, and B, you're probably going to need more people. You're going to have to pay for more people to check these things. So just with that in mind, where do you stand on it? Does that make you think that random checks are probably the right way to go?
Probably, because I think if you're having so many people to check everyone, it's just time consuming, and people would have to be at the stadium hours and hours before. I remember when I went to the Emirates a couple of weeks ago, I think they were doing random checks, but I wasn't sure if they were. So it was a bit frustrating because they sent an email literally less than 48 hours before saying you either have to be double jabbed, prove that you've got a negative test. I think those were the two things they asked for. And if you do get positive, just stay at home. But I think for clubs who don't have the financial power, like at Arsenal, they had probably hundreds of staff at the bottom of the stairs and then at the top of the stairs. And then as you're going into the kiosk, checking this stuff. Whereas a smaller club probably doesn't have the financial power to do that. So probably random checks are the way to go forward, because you can have it with less people. You don't necessarily need lots and lots of staff to do that. But I think it's all down to each individual club and how they can afford to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wonder, is it viable? As a Liverpool fan, we have seen, I don't know whether you've seen the queues that we're trying to get into the ground with the whole new system of ticketing. It's all digital tickets. If then you add in something where people have to also show their little passports on the phone to say, yeah, I've had a negative test, or yeah, I'm double jabbed. You're just knocking the time. You're just doubling it. I'm just looking at the death rates that if you look back at January and February, over 1,000 people were dying a day, and that's pretty scary. There was like 60,000 cases a day. We've had like 40,000, 30,000 recently. and 100 people are dying a day. So I know it's sad. People are dying. It's terrible, but that shows the vaccines are working. So yeah, I mean, as I think Charlie said, it's very difficult to tell everyone to get double jabbed. Some people don't want to get jabbed. Some players don't want to get jabbed. And also some people aren't eligible to have both of the jabs yet because they're too young. So you're discriminating against them. Very difficult to look at from there. Right, let's move on. Let's fly through a couple of other bits that we've got to talk about. We'll quickly go round on this one. Obviously the Champions League is changing in a couple of years. UEFA were planning on giving a couple of spots away to teams who didn't necessarily qualify, but getting it on historical benefit, maybe, would you say? Or historical performance, I should say. Charlie, the saying that they're potentially going to scrap that, it would have meant if it was in this season, Tottenham would have qualified for the Champions League, even though they finished below Leicester and West Ham. This whole Swiss model of the Champions League thing, what do you make of that? And also, do you think getting rid of this, letting people in because they've done well a couple of years ago is a good move?
No, completely against that model. It just takes out the whole integrity of succeeding, really. I mean, you look at how, sort of, say, for example, we're 75% of the way into the season, and I don't know, Leeds United are in fourth. I don't know, for something like that might happen, and then they work out that by it, or say, for example, that they will qualify, but because of this model they won't qualify. Then what do they have to play for? I think the whole integrity of it all. Or, for example, Tottenham, and they get to that point and they're not going to qualify, but they know that they will qualify because of this model. I think it just completely takes the integrity out of the whole of the game, and there's nothing to really play for. There's nothing to succeed for. So I'm completely against that model. I think it should be on a merit system every single season where you qualify based on how you've played that year rather than, your historical performances.
Yeah, Dom, UEFA were very outspoken against the Super League. And the Super League was very much an idea of teams historically who are, let's say, larger clubs, if you like, would be in the Super League regardless. Has this forced UEFA's hand to get rid of this idea because of their stance on the Super League? And obviously, it's pretty much the same thing, isn't it? If you're just going to let people in to a tournament without qualifying.
Yeah, I think it's hypocrisy. I think these people are two sides of the same coin. I think the same people who run UEFA, if they put research into running something similar to the Super League, they probably would do it. This is about rich businessmen at the top of football competing for the money. I don't think it's about them, one side having more care for the solid integrity of the game than another. And I think this example why UEFA of trying to award a club who finished in the top four for a few seasons in the row and has a big stadium now should be getting the Champions League, as opposed to two clubs, one especially in West Ham, because West Ham won the league a few years before, who were just making mount steady progress under a manager who's not been rated. Football is all about competition. It's about who has the best season, who performs the best, and the best get the best get the most. I mean, that's the point of the sport. That's at the root of the competition. And people like UEFA trying to do away with that with measures like this historical stuff. Like it just takes away from the spirit of the game for me. It's just sickening, really.
No, I'm with you. Theo, obviously you're an Arsenal fan, and Arsenal look quite a bit off the pace at the moment. Would you have been happy with this to stay in, just in case you give Arsenal an off chance of getting in the Champions League?
Well, no, actually, the example here was used with Spurs. I couldn't think of anything worse than seeing Spurs succeed. So that's my short one.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you'd be well up for Spurs getting in the Champions League. God forgive me. Yeah, I think, do you know what gets me about it is UEFA made themselves out to be like the angels of football when the Super League was out, and they were out saying it's wrong and it's immoral and stuff like that. They're just as bad. Bad. And I wish people would have took that momentum of the Super League onto UEFA to get more change. Because, I mean, this whole Swiss model thing, and I know they've kind of seen the light with not letting people in historically. It's just daft. So fair play. Let's just quickly actually run through some scores, Dom. I know Villa are absolutely running away with this one against Barrow. It's 3-0. Anything to report for us from the game?
I mean, Barrow looked all right, but Villa just sort of ran through them on every attack, really. Team's playing quite well. El Ghazi's having a good game. can't really have any complaints. The Carney Chukwuemeka standing out in midfield, I'd say as well. Cameron Archer's having a good game up front. Excited to see some half-time subs maybe. 3-0 up, you can take some risks. And no complaints from me.
Good stuff, mate. Good stuff. I'm glad one of our teams are winning at the moment. We've also got, let's just have a quick run through, see if there's any teams in our area. Birmingham City getting beat 1-0. Sunderland are drawing 1-1 with Blackpool. We've got Cardiff City 1-0 down against Brighton. Everton are drawing 1-1 with Huddersfield. Leeds, Crew Alexander is goalless. Any other teams there in our area? Wolves are still 0-0 with Nottingham Forest. That one's still playing. I think that's all the teams in our area that I can see, and I do apologise if I've missed anybody there. But yeah, that's the latest. That's the latest scores. Some of the games are nearly finished as well. It was a staggered kick-off time, wasn't it? Some of them were 7 o'clock, some of them were 1:45, and a couple of them were 8 o'clock. So we'll keep you updated with that as the night goes on. Let's just have a little word about while we're talking about UEFA. They've honoured Simon Kierkegaard, I can't remember how you pronounce his name, from Denmark, and the medical team who pretty much saved Christian Eriksen's life when he fainted. He had a heart attack, didn't he, on the pitch in one of the opening games of the Euros. Charlie, it's a well-deserved award, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think without them, he wouldn't be alive. So, they deserve probably more. An award probably doesn't do their actions justice, but when the whole world was, or the whole of Europe was watching, they stood up and did their job and acted as quickly as possible. And they'll train for stuff like this to happen, but you don't expect it to happen. And when it does, they've just got to do what they trained for. And an award is perfect recognition for them. But for the rest of their lives, I think everyone will be so grateful that they acted as quickly as they did and as swiftly. Yeah,
Dom, obviously, as Charlie says, he's not trained for any of this. It was just instinct, isn't it? And I mean, it's difficult to picture what was going through his mind at that time, isn't it? To save someone's life and give him CPR on the pitch. So, as I say, well deserved. Would you agree?
I mean, of course. I'm in absolute awe of people like Simon Kjær who can, in a situation like that where nobody can be expected to act in that way, has quite literally saved someone's life. It was the way that he sort of gave him CPR before anyone else could, which is, I think he got his cleared his tongue airway as well, which kept him breathing for longer, comforted his wife, led his team in forming the protective wall around him. Simon Kjær has saved Christian Eriksen's life, and he deserves all of the recognition in the world for that.
Absolutely. And Theo, obviously, very difficult to go last on a question which you have all night, but have you got anything to add to that?
No, just echoing what the guys are saying as well. Fully deserved. It was at that moment I just remember, you put, the game aside, you put your differences aside, you're helping, a fellow sportsman, and yeah, all credit.
Yeah, definitely. Not enough good words to say about him. And the whole Denmark team and Anthony Taylor as well, to be fair, and everyone that was there who saved his life. It's just a huge credit to them all. Theo, I'll come to you first with this one. I won't leave you out till last. I think it's only fair. Obviously, we've seen the trouble at Nice and Marseille in the week, or a couple of nights ago even. Basically, for those that didn't see it, somebody in the stand threw an object, let's say. Somebody allegedly threw an object. We'll just be careful with our words for legal reasons. Towards Dimitri Payet, who then allegedly throws it back, and all hell breaks loose from there. Marseille storm off the pitch, refuse to play the end of the game. There's stands being closed. That stand is being closed for the next 4 games at Nice, and there's going to be an inquest, if you like, to see what happened. First of all, Theo, what did you make of the situation? And generally, what are your thoughts on it? Is it a return to hooliganism? And what did you make of Marseille storming off the pitch?
Yeah, when I saw those videos and clips going around, I was quite shocked, actually. It's not something I expected to see. The first picture I saw was one of our Arsenal loanees, Mathieu Guendouzi, who was involved and subsequently got some marks on his neck. But it is a shame that fans, whoever it was, got involved in that way. And it shouldn't be part of the game. That stuff we saw it years gone by, but I don't think it should be part and parcel of the game anymore. It should, should allow the footballers to, do the game, and you come and be part of this community. And it's a shame because, young people are there, and young people watching at home as well. And it's probably not a good representation of what the game should be. It should be, a place we come and enjoy ourselves and, go home, but you shouldn't be taking part in those things. So, yeah, all I can say is that it is a shame that this situation has had to happen. And now people who perhaps bought tickets for the next couple of games can't now go purely because of the situation. So it is a shame that that situation happened.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a situation where, I mean, I'm assuming again, but somebody allegedly throws a bottle, and it's that one instance that kickstarts the whole rest of it. And as you say, it's not fair on those who were at the top of the stand, completely out the way on the other side of the stand. Don, what did you make of the scenes, and what was your initial thoughts of when you seen, as Theo says, some of the players were again allegedly assaulted? What did you make of all that?
I think it's just disgusting, really. I think football fan culture needs to come under question and scrutiny a lot of times because of the, discrimination, the violence, and I mean, that's sort of been manifested there in what's happened in this game. And as Theo said, it sort of makes football a far less welcoming environment for younger people or people who just have been put off the sport by its reputation and stereotypes around it. And it's incidents like these that strengthen those stereotypes, and it's a massive shame. And it's also a shame that I've even seen people trying to blame Demetri Payet for his alleged, sort of response to it by, also throwing a bottle back. I'd say it's very difficult to sort of try and gauge a human's response in that kind of situation, isn't it? It's very easy to say, I'll be the bigger man and don't throw it back, but when you're getting verbal abuse at you, and then that becomes physical and they're against your teammates, it's very easy to have a moment where you just respond. But the way that it escalated was just disgraceful, really. I don't really have words for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting you say about Payet. I've seen some people saying he shouldn't have thrown it back. And you know what? I think he'll regret throwing it back. But at the same time, in that situation, emotions are high. He's probably very angry that someone's launched something at his head.
He's a human being, isn't he?
Exactly, mate. You can't say he's not gonna do it. Charlie, what did you make of it, and what do you make of the sanctions that have already been imposed, and should there be any more for the fans, for the players, for the ground, the club?
Yeah, look, it's no one wants to see scenes like that. I think I'm in the camp of saying that I don't think he should have thrown it back, but I think in the heat of the moment it's very hard to you can understand exactly what he's coming on. But I think there has to be a level now of a decision of what is I'm only making an assumption. I don't know whether it was an item that was already in the ground or that was brought in. But if it's come and been sourced from within the ground, for example, it's been sold to him, I think it's a tough one, because you've got to look at whether plastic's just been sold or whatever else. But look, it's horrible, and the club should, and the majority of the fan base won't have been involved anywhere near like that. So one person's actions has led to a whole sort of strictness on the club, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, those sanctions are incoming in the next, I think it's 4 days or something like that. I'm not too sure. But yeah, not very good scenes to see at a football game. I mean, suppose entertaining in a way for us that are watching it live, but at the same time, not the type of entertainment that you want from football. Gentlemen, we'll wrap up with some transfer news. Just very briefly, Theo, I'll come to you first. We've got a bit of a bombshell earlier this week, or maybe late last week, that Robert Lewandowski is hoping to leave Bayern Munich. Feels like he's achieved everything he can in Germany. What do you make of his decision to come out and say he wants to move, and where would be a decent, point for him to land in world football?
Well, I think a lot of these footballers, when they've achieved all they can ever achieve at one club, for example, Ronaldo, going to Italy, and Messi. Well, Messi's situation is complex, but going to another club when you've basically achieved everything you want at a single club, I think it's a good move and a good time for him. He's probably seen it all. I'd probably say likely destinations place like Manchester City or something like that. Or if he wants to completely go elsewhere and he's had enough, in USA or something like that. But you say that bombshell. The latest bombshell I saw just before I came in, it was Cristiano Ronaldo. Apparently he wanted to go to Manchester. So who knows what might happen.
That'd be very interesting if he was to go back to United. I think he's got MLS written all over him eventually, but the guy is 36 and he looks like 25. And I think he'll play till he's like 48 because he just looks after himself that well. That will be one to certainly watch. Whether Manchester United need him or not, I'm not sure. Especially with signing Sancho and stuff. But City, he wants to go to City.
City, not United.
Well, yeah. That's a little bit of a bombshell indeed.
Yeah,
that's going to ruin his legacy.
Yeah, if he will only go there if Harry Kane doesn't go to Manchester City.
Okay, and that brings us on nicely to our next point then, because Dom, obviously, the whole Harry Kane situation is still up in the air. I personally thought it was going to happen after he was out of the team against City. Then I thought it was going to happen again at this weekend. It didn't. Has he missed his chance, or has he still got a little bit of time to pull that move off? What do you think? Are we going to see City in, a Manchester City branded, Kane in a Manchester City branded top, or has he missed the boat?
As a football fan who's had a transfer saga of their own this summer over an elite English player getting moved to Manchester City and haggling over a fee and the finalities and the complexities of the deal and that sort of boiling on for a long time. What I will say is I don't think it's as simple as missing the boat now. The fee was agreed for Jack Grealish way before the move actually happened. I've read this week that Man City are ready to table a bid closer to what Daniel Levy values Harry Kane at, and that'll be a lot closer. I do think that the potential option of Cristiano Ronaldo, as we talk about, is absolutely massive to this transfer saga. Even the option of Robert Lewandowski as well. City need a striker. I think we can all agree with that watching them play. And having a choice between Kane, Lewandowski, and Ronaldo, the latter being, in some people's eyes, the greatest of all time. Someone who is just an elite forward. He would bring so much to the Premier League if he came back to the league. All these things, it would just be absolutely massive for football, massive for City. I think it would win them the league if they signed any of these three players. In terms of Kane, I think it depends on Levy's stinginess. If there isn't an agreed release clause, Levy will hold out, and then I think City will give up, and with only a week left, will work on a deal for Cristiano Ronaldo. If they manage to get Levy to agree and be a bit more reasonable, then I think they'll get their man Harry Kane.
Okay. It's certainly rumbling on for longer than, all parties are probably like, except Daniel Levy, really. But as you say, he's a Tottenham player. He's got a lot of time in his contract. And they're well within the right to keep him there. Staying with Tottenham, Charlie, there's rumours that Nuno Espirito Santo is looking to poach one of his old players from Wolves in Adama Traore. What do you make of that signing? Is it a good one for Tottenham, and do you think, what are the chances of it going ahead?
He's an unreal player. He's Adama Traore. He signed for Middlesbrough from Aston Villa, I think it was, and he was a bit of a nobody really, and he came in and he used to get everybody out the seats. It was unreal. I've never seen a player like him. But what he needs nurturing by a manager. He needs someone to look after him, and I'd be worried if he went to another one of the big six in someone that doesn't know him. So if he was to go with Nuno to Spurs, I think that's a great move for him, because Nuno will know exactly what he's like. Aitor Karanka knew exactly what Adama Traore was like. He used to nurture him. He'd have him on the same side as Aitor was, to try and make sure that he could shout and give advice to him. So I think it'd be a great move for him. I'd love to see him go to Spurs. I think obviously Wolves may not have the most successful season, so the chances of that coming in are quite high. And just as we talk about transfer sagas, obviously that could be the big move that obviously if Spurs potentially maybe looking at spending some of that money that they may get if Harry Kane does depart.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? Because the price now is probably, whatever the price is now, it's going to certainly go high or higher once teams realise that Tottenham have got 120, 150 million sitting in the bank. So they'd be wise if they're going to sell Kane to start doing some deals and getting those players in before that. The only other one I was going to mention from a personal point of view is there's more rumours yet again about Kylian Mbappe joining Liverpool. Not going to happen. Going to keep telling myself that's not going to happen. Certainly not on a free, which is what's being rumoured today. There is not a chance Liverpool will sign Kylian Mbappe on a free. I also don't think there's a chance he ever leaves PSG for nothing after he spent nearly 200 million, even though his contract runs out at the end of the season. It's just not going to happen. But, you know, we can dream in secret. I can dream and pretend he's going to join us next year. So we'll see what happens. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. For those that don't know, Theo is away on holiday. Dom is joining us while Aston Villa are playing, and Charlie was drafted in last minute to jump in and help us. So really do massively appreciate your time this evening, and as ever, thank you very much to everyone for watching. If you did miss the podcast, you can go back and watch it again from the start. And we are live hopefully every Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Otherwise, it'll be Wednesdays, depending on if there's any football on, which probably should have been this week, to be fair, with Aston Villa being on. So my apologies. But we will catch you all again very soon next week. Have a great week. Enjoy the football of the weekend, and we'll see you soon.